So let's go ahead and take a few moments and discuss the difference between in and exists. So at this point, let me go ahead and do this query against these two tables. There's the patient table, and we have John, Jill, and Billy. And then let's also go ahead and take a look at the patient disease table. And you will notice that if we were to go ahead and take a look at this previous result, which is the patient table, we have 111, 113, 114, whereas in this one, the 114 is missing, so Billy is not in the mix. So Billy is someone who actually is not associated with any kind of disease. Now, let's just imagine that I want to go ahead and pick up all the folks who do actually have a disease. I'd like to go ahead and display their name. So once again, let's just make sure that we know what the columns are. And so the column is F name. So one thing that I could do at this point is I could say, well, I'd like to go ahead and display the F name. And notice the F name is something that appears in the patient table. But of course, I want to go ahead and only bring up the folks who have a disease. So I can say F name from patient, and then I can do a natural join with patient disease. Okay, so at this point, what occurs is we only go ahead and pick up the folks who are sitting also in this table, and the connecting point would be patient ID. So if I was to go ahead and run this, notice at this point, these are the folks who actually have the disease. Now, of course, John is appearing twice because he actually has two diseases, and that's why he's there in that way. Now, of course, you can also go ahead and do the join in this way. Let's go ahead and just come up with an alias here and an alias here. And we say we're p.c1. Well, we can just say p1 dot, I think it's SSN if I'm not mistaken. This is no, it's patient ID. P1 dot patient ID equals to PD dot patient ID. And actually it's not P1, but rather P. And so if I was to go ahead and run this, well, there it is. I get the same results. Okay, so you're able to go ahead and come up with the same results, whether you go ahead and do the join in this way or whether you do it the other way. Now, let's go ahead and ask a different type of question. I'd like to go ahead and get a listing of all the folks who are not associated with any kind of disease. And that would be, of course, Billy. So there are various ways that I could go ahead and do this. So let's go ahead and come here. And, okay. So I go ahead and take a look at the patient table. And we'll just say P here. And then I can go ahead and use the not in clause. So I can say where patient ID not in. So basically we're going to go through all of the rows in here. And then if those rows are not in this other table, and this is where we go ahead and do a subquery. So select patient ID from patient disease. So the very first thing it's going to go ahead and do is run this query. It'll come up with a list of all the folks who have diseases. And that would be this list right here. So it would come up with all these folks. So 111, 113, or 111 again, and 113. And then it would also go ahead. So at this point, it has this list that it's looking at. And then what occurs is it's going to go ahead and go through every one of these and say, well, is that 111 in that list? Is the 113 in the list? Is the 114 in the list? And of course, so it's going to go ahead and process each and every single one against that list that we acquired from having run this statement right there. And so, of course, the only one, 114, would not be in the list. So when we run this, notice Billy actually shows up. Now, another way that we could actually go and accomplish the exact same thing is using the not exist. Now, there is one thing that I want to go ahead and mention, which is when you're looking at this in or the not in, you're going to go ahead and do this first. You're going to come back with a list of values, and then those values will actually be checked against the patient ID for every single row in the patient table. So that's how that's working out. Now let's go ahead and just see how the not exist is going to work. So we come down here, and so at this point, with the not exist, we're going to go ahead and remove this. There are no columns. And then, of course, we have not exists here. And because we have no column, unlike this one where patient ID is being connected with the patient ID, this one, there is nothing here that needs to be connected. So I can go ahead and remove this. I can go ahead and just put something, or, that asterisk, or put in some other column name. That doesn't matter. Now, what occurs is, unlike the in clause in which you went ahead and ran this first, in this scenario, it's going to be different. In this scenario, it's going to go ahead and look at every single row, and it's going to go ahead for every single row, it's going to go ahead and run this. Now, notice that at this point, we have not linked this table with this table. And so let's go ahead and just do this here for a moment. And let's go ahead and call this PD. And so we're going to go ahead and say where p.patient ID equals to pd.patient ID. So let me explain what is going on here at this point. If I was to go ahead and run this, the very first thing it's going to go ahead and do is going to go ahead and say, all right, I want to go ahead and process that row. And I'd like to go ahead and find out if this 111 that we're looking at, okay, so that first row, if it's going to go ahead and equal to any of the rows in the patient disease table where we can find a match. So let's see if we can go ahead and find out 111 in the patient disease table. So let's go ahead and run the patient disease table. Oh yes, we can find 111. And as soon as it actually comes up with a single row, this means we actually found a row. Now row, we find it, it means it's true, we found the row. Now the opposite of true is false. That's what the not does. And whenever you actually go ahead and get a false from this means that the row that you're processing, so let's go back. The row that I'm processing is this one right here in the patient table. This means that this row is going to be rejected. So I only accept a row that I'm processing from the outside query if I get a true from this piece right here. Let's go ahead and try another one. So then we come over here. And here we're looking at 113. So it says, hey, 113, we'd like to go ahead and find out if that patient ID is existing in the patient disease table. And so let's go to the patient disease table. Yes, we have 113. We find a match. So we have one row, means it's true. True, its opposite is false. This means the very row that we were processing, which was this one right here, it gets rejected. So once again, when it's false, we reject the row. Then let's go ahead and come over here. In this case, we're going to go ahead and process this row right here. Now this row, 114. So I'm trying to look for a 114 where I can find a match with patient disease. So let's look at patient disease. Do I find a 114? No, I don't. So then this means that for 114, that gives me a false. I can't find anything. I can't find any rows. So this is false. The opposite of false is true. True means the very row that you're on. And what row am I on? I am on this row right here. This means this row is going to get accepted. And from that given row, I go ahead and display the F name. And so let's go ahead and run this and make sure that this actually will give us Billy. So look at that. That's another way of actually doing this. Now, let's go ahead and try another one. We could also go ahead and use the minus clause. We could say select F name from patient and where a minus. And then we can do a select fname from patient disease. So we'd like to go ahead and find out all the folks who are here who are not in here. But there's a problem. Patient disease doesn't have fname. Okay, so what can we do with this? Well, we could actually go ahead and do a natural join with patient. And so in this case, we get all the folks who actually have diseases. All the folks who have diseases. And this is all the folks, whether they have diseases or not. And so what's going to be left over is going to be that Billy. So let's go ahead and check it out. Okay, so notice that we have the same number of columns. If I want to go ahead and say over here that Billy, no disease, notice at this point we have 2 columns, whereas this one has 1 column. So I could actually go ahead and take this and do this. So look at that. I say Billy has no disease. Okay, so that's something else to go ahead and keep in mind with regards to all these 3 different ways that you're able to accomplish this. Now, there is one other final piece that I wanted to go ahead and share with you. And for that, let's go ahead and come over here. I have these 2 tables, A and B, and they have these columns, C1 and C2. And then I went ahead and put in these values. So for table A, we have values 1 and 2. For table B, I have 1, 3, and I have a null in here. Okay, so this null is kind of interesting. So let's go ahead and find out what exactly it is that makes that interesting. So let's go ahead and use the not in clause. Okay, or actually let's go ahead and use the in clause to find out what are the values that are in A but not they're in A and B. So of course that's really quite simple. Select from A natural join B. Okay, we've already done that. And so it should actually go ahead and give us at this point, notice we get all these rows here. So, I think the reason for this is because I went ahead and did some duplicate inserts here. Let me go ahead and okay, so let's go ahead and try this again. So A natural join B. So this one, and that actually finds a match with that. I'm actually surprised here that we are getting these many rows. So 1, 1, 1, 3, it's like a cross join that we're getting for some reason. So it's almost as if 2 times 3, we're getting 6 rows. So for some reason, it's actually making it think that we're looking at this. Okay, well, that's interesting. So let's go ahead and just actually do A, B, where A dot C1 equals to, and there's a reason, my apologies. The reason why an actual join doesn't work is because this is C1 and that's C2. So it doesn't find any matching columns. And so we have to go ahead and do it this way. Okay, so there we go. So that's the one that is common between the 2. Now let's go ahead and do the not in again, or the in, like from A, where C1 is in, select C2 from B. Okay, so there we go. We find all the folks who are in both, which is of course 1. And we could actually go ahead and do where exists, and then here we actually say select, it doesn't really matter what we put in here, from B, where A dot C1 equals to, or where C1 equals to C2. And the reason why we don't really even need to go ahead and identify the A and the B, because C1 and C2 are different column names. And so once again, if I go ahead and find a match here, okay, then this means that it's true, and if it's true, then we accept the row. So in this case, let's go ahead and find out. So look at that, we get that. Okay, so all of those are possibilities. Now I'd like to go ahead and, well, actually, let's go ahead and do one more. I could go ahead and do a select, and let's just say we have C1 from A, and we could actually go ahead and do an intersect select C2 from B. So if I was to go ahead and run that, we're looking at everything that intersects. So there are all these different ways that we're able to accomplish this. Now, I'd like to go ahead and just look at the not in. So once again, if I was to just do a select from A and select from B, so there's from A, there's from B, and I go ahead and do something like this, select from A, where C1 is not in, select C2 from B. Okay, now at this point, once again, what is going on is we have 1 and 2 here, whereas in this one we have 1, 3, and null. So we're looking for all the ones that are in A but not in B. So that means that, once again, looking at this A, this 2 is not sitting in the table B. Okay, so that's what we are expecting. Now let's see what we actually get when we run it this time. It gives us nothing. And there's a reason for that. The reason for that is because when we go ahead and run this, you notice what we get is a null, a 3, and a 1. So in essence, really what is going on here when we go ahead and run that, okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and put the results here. We get a 1, 3, and null. So what happens is it's going to go and say, is 1 not in this one? Well, 1 is, of course, now look at that. 1, we do find a match. Okay, so that goes. 2, not in here. Well, 2 does not equal to 1. 2 does not equal to 3. 2 does not equal to null. You see, we cannot go ahead and check for null using the not equals to, which is what the not in is. Okay, so not in is basically looking at all of these values that are going to be generated, but using the not equals. But once again, when it sees that null, where it says 2 does not equal to that, does not equal to that, does not equal to that, it doesn't know how to go ahead and deal with that. And so for this reason, it actually comes back with nothing. So to go ahead and resolve this problem, okay, we're going to go ahead and do something else. So once again, remember that this actually didn't give us anything. So if I was to go ahead and do a select from A where not exists, select from B where C1 equals to C2. Okay, now at this point, once again, it's going to go ahead and say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and process the 1 in here. And do I find the 1 in B when we go ahead and do that matchup? The answer is going to be true. The opposite of true is going to be false. So the 1 will be eliminated. Now, then it does the 2. So we are going to be on the 2 row for A. And then it says, let's go ahead and find a match. It doesn't find a match because there are no 2s. And so that will return a false. The opposite of false is true. And so the 2 will be accepted. So let's go ahead and see what happens. Actually, there it is. Okay. And then finally, of course, if you wanted to, you could go ahead and say that, you know what, I have from A, and I'd like to go ahead and do a minus and select C2 from B. And so at this point, when we go ahead and run this, look at that, we get the 2. And so hopefully that helps out somewhat with regards to knowing the difference between the not in, the not exist, or the exist and the in, along with the variations of using minus and the similarities between all this.